Hello and welcome to episode 97 of A Slice of Medieval. We're getting very close to that big 100. Today we've got a fabulous guest. We're welcoming him back, and he's always one of our favourites. So today we are welcoming back David Gilman. He has countless radio, television and film credits and was principal writer on A Touch of Frost and nominated for a BAFTA. He writes in many eras, but his Master of War series, set in the 100 Years' War and now up to 9 books, is a masterclass in writing medieval warfare. And he's here to talk about that 9th book today, Rage of Swords. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Derek, good morning to you both. One little correction. I was a lead writer on the Touch of Frost, but only for the last 9 years, the last 9 series. So
only for 9 series.
Well, the last 9 years. There we are.
So we're back with Thomas Blackstone again, David.
Yeah.
And you sent him to Italy. What made you send him to Italy this time?
Well, he's been to Italy before, and he's come across the Milanese family, the Visconti, before now, and they are sworn enemies. So it was putting him back into a difficult situation. But what happened was at the end of To Kill a King, the previous book, Thomas Blackstone was basically on his deathbed. And news came through that Prince Lionel, the King Edward III's son, was going to Italy to marry the Visconti's young daughter. And the dowry for that was 200,000 gold florins. So Blackstone being Blackstone, and he being instructed by the king, was to go to Italy and make sure he gets the 200,000, which will help the prince, the Black Prince, fight his war against the French. So that was his mission. He cleared the way forward for the Prince Lionel, and he had to somehow secure the 200,000 gold florins. And that was the basis of the story, his story at least, because there are a couple of strands in the book, Rage of Swords. We brought Henry, his son, back into it, and I had a little sideline for him as well, which you can talk about later. But that was the premise of taking him to Italy.
I think it works really well as well, because it actually, when I was reading it, I got thinking that, we always think of the 100 Years' War as this Anglo-French conflict of over, I think it was about 117 years or something.
Yeah, it was actually, yeah, on and off.
But it was the English against the French. But your entire series shows that it wasn't just this English, French, and no one was involved. It was very much a European war, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It also brought in, it brought in Brittany, Spain, Castile, Navarre, and it did in a way involved the Visconti side of things, the Italian side of things. And in fact, I'm just doing a bit of research now, just to jump ahead a little bit, on the next Master of War, which will probably center around Queen Joanna I of Naples. And she actually owned parts, here we go, complicated. She actually owned Avignon. She was part of Avignon. So right. there are these French-Italian links as well. So things can unfold as we go along with this series. But yeah, so you're quite right. It involved basically the whole of Europe. And it brought in so many characters. You had kings and queens and mercenaries, condottieri, and all these kind of things. So it's a very rich, fertile ground time to write about.
So people who weren't actually involved specifically had interests in the war. So even Germans and Portuguese would have been watching closely to see what happens, because there is this follow-on effect, isn't there, from war, trade, international relations and things.
Yeah, it actually did go wide across. I mean, it was fought through proxies. There were trade networks, um, marriages, the Pope, the papal influence, that was important. And there were also, don't forget, in that time, there were lots of regional lords and power units going on. So you had to maneuver through all that as well. So it was wide open. It wasn't just like France as we think about it, or Italy as we think about it. There were just so many provinces and states. I mean, the papal states in Italy and down south was more held by Normans. My word, it was literally a checkered field of activity. So you can dive in anywhere really and pull up a story. That makes it sound very easy, doesn't it?
But they also had an indirect effect upon the Italian states, for example, because they were warring amongst themselves.
Yeah, the Papal States, they hold a huge chunk of Italy. Also, we had the Visconti, the Bernardo. There were two brothers, Galeazzo and Bernardo Visconti. Bernardo had already been excommunicated, so in fact the Papal States were in war against him, and his brother, who was known more for culture and learning and had enormous wealth, he tried to keep out of his brother's problems with the Pope, because what Galeazzo was doing, he was marrying in to the great powerhouses. He's already married into his son into the French court. Now he's going to marry his 13, 14-year-old daughter into the English court. And so that allowed me to bring in Prince Lionel as a new character. Here was a 30-year-old man who had been widowed for the last 5 years. He was called the second son of Edward III, but in fact he was the second surviving son, because William of Hatfield, the second son, was actually died in infancy. So we call him the second son. But he had a daughter who was the same age as the girl he was going to marry. You know, these were the times that they lived in. And so getting him there, getting Prince Lionel there into Italy, that opened up the whole new story for Thomas Blackstone to get involved with his arch enemy, the Visconti.
Awkward for Thomas. So this is just you've had Blackstone experience a number of theatres in the 100 Years' War: France, Brittany, Spain, Italy. He does get about a bit. I've noticed that. So which is your favourite to write about?
Oh, that's a terrible question. Each unto its own, really. I mean, because each country offers its own dilemma. France, of course, is our nearest neighbour, and that's where it all started. And within France, you've got all the various conflicts going on as well. So France, in a way, is easy. You can get into France easy enough. You can move around France. You go down to Gascony, Aquitaine, where the prince, the Black Prince, has his powerhouse, as it were. So that puts Blackstone in the later books down there with the prince, and he fights for the prince. But then you've got the guy across the border, who is Charles, the King of Navarre, small little pocket on the Spanish-French border. And he's a really duplicitous, terrible character. But so that had to be brought in. So that allows me a link into Spain. And then after Navarre, of course, you've got Pedro the Cruel in Castile, who was an absolute terrible man, you know. But these were the alliances being made. So these are my routes into these various countries. So to have a favorite, it's really very difficult, because once I'm immersed in that country, that's where I am.
Mm.
I'm not answering your question really very well, but it's so specific as to each book as to where I
Yeah,
am. That is my favourite at the time.
right.
It's a bit of a Bruce Forsyth. You're my favourite. It's one of those, I'm afraid.
I think the Hundred Years' War gives you plenty of food for writing, doesn't it? You're up to 9 books now and don't seem to be stopping. So it's like there's just an abundance of things to write about in this war, isn't there?
There is, and don't forget, there's also all the fictional elements that I bring in as well. So that's one does, as we know. You've got your basis in fact, and then you bring in the fiction. I tried to kill off Thomas Blackstone twice.
I know that book 8, I thought he was a goner.
So, and everybody said, no, 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 no. So here we are. We're continuing. Until when, I don't know. But there we are. Yeah. But it's a feast. You've just got to dig it out. It takes me a long time to dig this stuff out.
Mm.
In Rage of Swords, I needed to bring in Henry, his son, because now he's of an age. He's 19, 20 years old. He's always been troublesome to his father. He has a love for poetry. He's a great womanizer. He's jumping in and out of girls' beds all the time. He's got a bodyguard now, courtesy of the king. But I had to give him something to do in Rage of Swords. And he actually has his own storyline in Rage of Swords.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do, or where to go with him. Yes, he can be a thorn in his father's side. And yes, he's very headstrong and off he goes and does things. But I needed something a bit more, more depth to it. And I came across a book called The Gilded Page. The name of the author is Mary Wellesley. I would recommend this book. It's a super book. It's about the medieval manuscripts and who were doing these fabulous designs, where they were doing it, but also the fact that there were women illustrators, illuminatrix. And I thought, well, this is where I give Henry his hook to go through the story in search of beauty and in search of the woman who created such beauty.
Typical teenager, just past teenage years. She's got to be beautiful because she's so talented.
Well, there you are, yeah, and anyway, and that's his story in this book. So it melds in quite nicely with what Thomas Blackstone has to do and how he has to outwit the Visconti.
Yeah, I think it works really well, and I love the idea of the parallel story with Henry, that he's doing his own thing and keeping most of it from his dad as well, because he knows his dad's not going to approve.
Absolutely, yeah. No.
These whimsical things, chasing somebody because of a manuscript. It's like, oh, honestly.
And it's an unusual period, isn't it? Because of the Black Death and the effects of that, which are being felt for a long, long time afterwards.
And it's still coming back, isn't it? Every now and then through this period.
Yeah, it comes back. I mention it if I have to mention it, because it came in pockets, don't forget, as well. It came into city-states in Italy, and it came into whole villages in France. And in one of the previous books, we talk about the Black Death. I can't remember which one it is, but they burn out whole villages, quite often with people inside their houses, So it was a brutal time. But yeah, it comes and goes, and it certainly has effect. And I think fairly late on, it goes back into Avignon as well, where the Pope is. So you've also got the papal schism coming up, where the Pope living in Avignon, really, he wants to go back to Rome. But Rome, in fact, at that time was a dreadful place to be. It was vile. They had crime on the streets. There was nothing holy about the place at all. So when he stayed and came back and went to Rome, back to Avignon, that's another little subplot one can explore in town.
I think also we have this view when we're reading about places like Germany and Italy in medieval times. We have this view of the countries we know today.
Yeah.
But Italy wasn't unified until 1848.
No, absolutely, yeah. And in fact, it was difficult. I took a view, particularly with Italy. There were so many dialects in all the different areas. And in Rage of Swords, And in fact, in one of the previous books as well, depending where they were, shall we say, in northern Italy, there was a slightly different way of speaking. And just to drop that into this book, Rage of Swords, he has to interpret the dialect. The dialect is slightly different. And in fact, that's very true today. My wife has Italian ancestry. And when she went to visit her family in Liguria, in northwest Italy, her family sort of came down from the mountains in the villages, and they couldn't converse with the people down on the coast.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's modern day. So
Yeah.
these dialects are there. So what I chose to do is this: you drop a little bit of dialect in, just so you can say, this is what's happening. Then if you interpret that, you then revert to what I would call, and what was called, the Tuscan language. The Tuscan language was one of poets and writers and governants, what have you. So you can say Italian, but in fact it was Tuscan in that area. Does that make sense? You see what I mean?
That does make sense.
Yeah, but you've got to work through this as an author. I think you've got to sort of allow your audience to know it's different and then to make it normal.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's like this idea that we have these days where, speak louder, everybody can understand English, and, just you have to be louder. So just to show people that there is difficulty in language always, and you have to acknowledge it in books. You can't just have everybody speaking English just to make it easy. And there is one of those things, isn't it? You see questions all the time of writers. Do you put the actual language in, or do you just say said in Italian or said in Tuscan? And
yeah, that's a very good point. And it's difficult even for professional authors. You've got to work it out and say, well, okay, there's a balance here. I've used it a few times, both in Master of War and also in this book that's just coming out soon. And it's a case for me. If I think I can get it correct, and I drop in a local language, it then has to be worked through by the characters to its meaning, or they have picked it up, or they've learned a little bit. And then if you have multiple characters with multiple language skills, if you've got a German and Italian or whatever, you do have to drop in order not to break your narrative. I believe you can say so-and-so, the Bohemian, spoke in German, which of course even that was different in those days, but he said in his own home language, and then the audience, the reader knows, oh yeah, okay, so he's the German, he's speaking, he's got to understand it, oh, he's interpreted that, and it's just got to come off the page. It's as simple as I can make it when I do it that way. But yeah, it is a issue.
Well, you see, as a non-fiction writer, it's very easy. You just either decide to put the original language in the text and the translation in the notes, or the translation in the text and the original language in the notes. You see, I have it easy.
Oh, easy peasy. I mean, it's really only a case. Look, for a fiction author, as you know, it's a case of a little bit of shading, a little bit of flavor.
I think that's the thing. It's the flavor. It gives you the flavor. It gives you the sense of being in a foreign country, and it is part of the ruses you can use to make people realize that everything's not the same just because they've moved from England to France to Italy.
And in a way, I wonder how they ever did manage, to tell you the truth. I think French was very much a common language,
and Latin.
Don't forget also, and also, well, not just Latin, because Latin was usually the language of the priests and the educated, the kings and the queens. That was, I believe that to be the case anyway. I think it was more French, which even in the English court was the common language. So French, in fact, was the lingua franca, if you like, of most of Europe, I would say. I would think so. I might be wrong, but that's how I've always seen it, because certainly when it comes to Latin, I've used the ploy once or twice where Thomas Blackstone, not being an educated man, he asked his educated son, what is that
Mm.
Latin phrase?
Yeah.
And his son had been to Oxford University, so he knows Latin. So that's very helpful as well. And if you remember in Rage of Swords, there is this huge trial, the papal trial at the end in Verona.
Yes.
And Latin was the language of the papal court. And it is Henry who conducts a defense of a woman in the trial in Latin.
Mm.
And there's Blackstone sitting on the sidelines with his men saying, what the hell is going on? What's he saying? And one of his men, I won't say who, but one of his men perks up, says, oh, he just said so and so and so and so.
Yeah, and they all looked at him. You speak Latin?
Yeah, exactly. So these are little games you can play, and it's a joy because it actually allows you to give something more to another character that you never expected.
Yeah, but it's a good realization for the reader as well, because I just automatically said Latin was the language everybody would know because of the church, and because I was thinking of Catherine of Aragon and Prince Arthur, who for some reason were destined to marry from the ages of 2 and 3, but nobody thought to teach them their spouse's language, but they could converse in Latin.
Yes, well, they were educated.
Yeah, but that's it. That's the higher echelons of society. They could speak Latin, but the lower echelons, like you say, they would have been more familiar with French, with the fact that a lot of French was brought over in the time of the Norman conquest and carried on being the language of the court until Edward III's time.
I remember when I was in Chartres, we did one of the Blackstones was round about Chartres Cathedral, and I remember standing outside Chartres Cathedral and looking at this huge engraving across the doorway, and it was as in many churches I came to obviously realize that this was a story being put in stone. To the common man, here's your birth, here's your life, here's your death, here's your religion, there's death waiting for you. That was their story. They didn't read, they didn't have the books, they didn't have the Bibles, what have you. So you had to reach the common man. The church reached the common man via different ways. So you've got to juggle a little bit with this, and it's fun to do. You can get caught out, but I do think it's fun to do, to find these things, because of course I've stood in front of churches and looked at these sculptures before thinking, oh, that's very nice. Yes, that's lovely. Oh, hang on, that's telling a story. Of course it's telling a story, you know. So these are the little things you can put into your work.
Those little details make it more authentic. And also, I'm, as a historian, sitting there thinking, right, I've got to look that up and see if that's true.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
Yeah, but a lot of it is, or with you, it either is or it's based on, it's extrapolated from the actual facts to make the story. That's the kind of fiction I like reading, stuff that actually sends me down rabbit holes.
Thank you for that, because I do get those responses from reading the fiction, and I do sort of get a bit OTT about trying to get the facts right when I have to quote facts, you know. And you can get, as you know, as a historian,
oh yes,
there are different variations being written, you know, so you've got to try and work that out, because readers do come back and say, do you know what? I really enjoyed that because it made me go and read up on the history of.
Yes.
So it opens a door, and you've been reading entertainment and you've gone and found something else. So that's nice to know.
Well, that's it, because with Prince, the fact that the story is based around Prince Lionel's marriage, he's probably the least known, certainly for me, of Edward III's children.
Yeah. Yeah,
and I always thought of him as a really young man, but he was 30 when he died. You know, so there's 30 years of life there that I know very little about, and that he gets little coverage compared to the Black Prince and John of Gaunt.
Well, because he died so young, but he was married, as I said before. He was, by the time we get him going to Italy, he has been widowed for 5 years. He was born in Antwerp, and when he died in Italy, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but when Galeazzo Visconti put on the wedding feast for Prince Lionel and his daughter. It was the most unbelievable, extravagant feast, celebration. I don't think it's ever been bettered by any other king or anybody. It was outrageous. The meat was gilded. They had this. They had horses coming in as gifts and armor. And don't forget, when Prince Lionel actually travelled from England to northern Italy, which is quite a journey, there were like 700 people with him. His whole court went with him. And in fact, I didn't mention it because I didn't want to get distracted. But Geoffrey Chaucer was with him in his household. He travelled. So I thought, well, I don't want to go down that route because I've got the Italian poet Petrarch waiting in the wings. So, you've got to draw a line somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So the 100 Years' War itself, what makes the conflict so fascinating?
Well, I think it was the start of the destruction of the elite. The whole chivalry thing, which we know works very well for the upper echelons, the elite, the courtly love and all this kind of thing. Well, when you're fighting hand to hand, there is no honor. That you are hacking away just to survive. Now, what happened particularly, as I'm sure you're aware, with the French, they came in full of brio on their armored horses with their armor, and it was honor to charge forward en masse and what have you. And what did the right-back English do? Well, they got off their horses, they put their horses to the rear. They stood their men-at-arms in the center. They put stakes out or dug holes in the front of them. They tried to pick their ground so that it was either boggy, marshy, or uphill. And they put their archers to the left, to the right. And when you've got the longbow archers hurtling thousands of arrows into the air, and these poor Frenchmen, in particular in this case, trying to charge, they came down in their hundreds. When they came down, they were massacred. So it destroyed this whole elitism of the French knighthood. That's what it did. It brought a leveling that I don't think, maybe they've never yet recovered from, I don't know. But that's what it did. It changed warfare. It became so different to what everybody had previously done, in broadest terms.
So that changed the tactics of warfare. So, but then weapons changing as well. Wasn't Cressy the first battle that had gun cannon or guns or something?
They had gunpowder, a cannon. Yes, they did a bombard at 1346 in Cressy, which is really Thomas Blackstone's first big battle, 1346. But I didn't bring it in. I did mention it, but it wasn't used particularly well, and it was something new, and it made a lot of noise. That's basically what it did. And you're quite right. I mean, the gunpowder and the cannons, they were increasingly used, but not as much as we perceive them to have been used. They weren't laying down cannonballs and whatever. That's all 18th century and 17th century. So it was coming in. But what was the most lethal weapon really was the longbowmen, the English and Welsh archers. They controlled the battle as far as.
So did the French not have longbows at all? Then did they just have crossbows? Or
They used to bring in Italian crossbowmen, and the crossbowmen had the name escapes me. It's Palaciers, and the Italian Genoese. They were mostly Genoese crossbowmen. And they had these huge crossbows. And while they were busy trying to get the thing loaded and pull it back and get the bolt in, they had a big shield upon their front. Meanwhile, the English archers are going whap, whap, whap. But it was like having a machine gun, and that was the difference. They were lethal, and they were so unique. and they were light of foot. And then if they ran out of their arrow shafts, they'd be in there with their killing knives, going through the visors, finishing off, and stealing what they could, taking what they could. Don't forget, there was also this honor system where if one knight beat another knight, he would yield and he'd be ransomed, and he'd promise not to fight for the next so many years or whatever. Yeah, so we had all this going on, and it really was a fascinating time.
So longbows and crossbows, what had the longer range, or was it just the reloading that meant that?
No, well, the reloading was amazing. I mean, that was what the English and Welsh longbow were using. But the range was, I think it was 350 yards was the range of the longbow. The trajectory is what worked well for the English fighters, because they put arcs of arrows up into the air that fell with velocity into horses, exposed places, and although there's still debate about it, that they pierced armor. The crossbowmen were I think more working on a level trajectory and lethal. Yes, I mean 14-inch bolts, be highly powered, but it was certainly the longbowmen who won the day every time.
I mean, there's a brilliant display at the Royal Armouries in Leeds where they've actually got the arrows suspended from the ceiling.
Oh, really? I haven't seen it.
It's wonderful. But it just shows you how all these arrows flying at the same time would have appeared to knights, and it just looks like, it's a rain of arrows, especially that first salvo. It must have been terrifying to see them all coming down.
Absolutely terrifying. Yeah, I mean, and it took so many people out. It killed so many people. And it's the way the English fought the war. It's what they did. They got off their horses basically and just stood their ground.
So you'd think being on a horse is an advantage?
Well, I think if you're on a war horse, and don't forget these were big beasties. You're on a war horse, you're charging through, you've got a lot of power. And yes, it was also the case, I think, if a war horse's blood was up, they were basically uncontrollable. They could charge through the ranks, but what good was that going to do? Because you're going to end up at the back, and then you're isolated. So what the bowmen would always try to do, they would change their arrowheads to kill horses. They would use the broadhead arrow. Against the knights, they'd use a bodkin arrow, which is slender and thin. So the broadhead ripped apart inside, so they would try and kill the horses. And if you bring a horse down, the man's going to come down with it.
Yeah.
So it was nasty work. It really was, and ferocious, absolutely ferocious. You were bludgeoned to death, you were knifed to death, you were speared to death. And it was a horrible way to fight a war, as far as I'm concerned. But then, have things changed very much these days? Yeah. Now we just kill more effectively, don't we? So we're still killing each other. There we are.
The other thing I was thinking was people involved had changed as well, hadn't they? Because in earlier years it was feudal, a knight owed service and brought his men-at-arms and his sergeant with him. But was it more now that they actually paid the knight's fee and the king paid people like Thomas Blackstone, who were basically career soldiers, rather than the 40 days of service and then pack up and go home?
You're quite right with all the smaller states, shall we say. The lord of the manor, he would have 12 men on foot and 2 on horse and whatever have you. And yes, he'd get paid for that because he had to feed his and so on. But when these bands of men who had fought in these battles got together, they were out and they were raping and pillaging, and they were just taking what they could get, and that's what happened, So someone like Thomas Blackstone, I tried to cover his back on this. So yes, he could go and take what he needed, but he was also on a payment plan, shall we say, from the king. He was covered. And because in the early days he had conquered towns, he was getting what they call patties. You would know the phrase, but it was a payment that the town had to make to him. So he was quite covered actually, and his money was being banked in Florence. He got his men's money, his own money, and he'd get it looked after because in the books, the link between King Edward and Florence was Father Torellini, and he was the banker's priest mediator. So the big banks in Florence, King Edward had the access to get the money. But of course, Thomas Blackstone, earning what he earned, when he earned, and how he earned, it was all invested in Florence with the banks. So he wasn't stupid about money. So do you see what I mean? I tried to cover him that he wasn't raping and pillaging. It was all the bad guys who were doing that.
Yeah.
It was Thomas Blackstone who was stopping it. You've got to give them a moral core, a moral character, haven't you? You've got to give them a strength.
But you also have to allow that not everybody had that.
Yeah, of course. But, over the course of these nine books, what has happened to Blackstone and his family? His son, his wife was murdered. His wife was raped and murdered. His daughter was killed. All of this happened over the course of books. So this affects his thinking as well.
Yes.
So he sees anybody rape anybody, they're going to be strung up. He's not going to tolerate anything like that. And so that gives him a status, a stature. Yes. In not just in my books, but in the period of history where he's operating. And it was interesting. I thought when I first started thinking about this, I thought, am I pushing the boat out a bit too much on this? And I realized, okay, it's fiction. I can do what I want. But there was a character. Gosh, his name escapes me. He was a very well-known mercenary, brutal mercenary in northern Italy. It's not John Hawkwood, it's another guy. And he had a soft spot for somebody. And he did this kind of thing. He wouldn't do that and he'd do this because he felt this for somebody. So they had feelings.
Well, yeah, they did. They were people.
Yeah.
So human beings. So they would have, some of them, because of the brutalities of war, would be totally brutal. But then he's not going to be a hero of your story, is he? We need a story where, yes, we need a ruthless hero who can fight a war, but
you've got to like him.
You don't want to put off the readers with, oh God, he's horrible.
Yeah, that's what fiction is about, isn't it? You've got to get the reader to like your character, and fiction is about the characters. You've got to embrace the characters and want to see what they want to do next.
Yeah, but giving him a reason, his wife's death and that, gives you an authenticity to it as him being a soldier. So it works really well.
There's also somewhere hidden in these books, which I haven't got to yet because of an age thing. But hidden within the books, his wife, when she was raped, she refused to abort the child, and she had the child. And this actually was the split in their marriage, But she made Blackstone promise to make sure that this child would be brought up in a monastery and looked after and paid. And in a couple of books back, Blackstone takes Henry to this monastery where the nuns are looking after this little boy. And he's only then about 4, 5, 6, I think it was. So he can't come into the story yet. But he's out there. He's in the background.
Yeah, and he did get mentioned in Rage of Swords. I remember him getting mentioned. Yeah, he got mentioned a couple of times. I think it was Henry.
Oh, did I mention him in Rage of Swords? Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, Henry mentions him a couple of times and knows he's got a brother in Italy somewhere. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. Yeah. I wrote Rage of Swords 2 years ago, so I've got to remember.
Yeah, but it's a good idea, that, isn't it? You've got this story. It's going to come into the story eventually. So just mention it once in a while so that people don't, when he does turn up, people don't go, well, you've never talked about him before. Where did he come from?
You can't just drop him in. Yeah, absolutely. So it's all part of this ongoing fabric of the stories, the narrative, and the characters. they've all got they've all got things going
Yeah.
on, particularly we concentrate on Thomas Blackstone,
And we wouldn't have got that if you'd killed him off in the last book, so in book 8. So we're glad he survived, even if it was that I can talk about it now because we're on to book
yeah.
9 now.
Yeah, I have to say it myself, I enjoyed that ending. Willie or won't he, to the last breath. There we are.
Yeah. I'm like, come on, David, hurry up and decide. Is he going to live or isn't he? Oh, he is. Oh, thank goodness. But talk about Edge of Sea. I think it's the best Edge of Sea ending I've read in a book because I just did not know what way it was going to go.
Yeah, well, it worked.
Oh yeah, it worked. It got me wound up.
Good.
I nearly died from not holding my breath,
I had one lady write to me. She was listening to the audio version in her car, which is really a worry, and she totally missed a turn off on the motorway. Miles past. Oh, yeah, but there we are.
Yeah. So a rather whimsical question.
All
Which
right.
of your characters would you like to invite to dinner?
Oh, dear me. Look, for a start, I don't think it could be dinner. It would have to be a tavern. We'd have to go to a tavern. And whether they would come speak to the likes of me, being a scribe, Blackstone's feelings about writers are very well known, Would he take up the invitation? I might be better off bringing in the bastard horse down to the stable and sharing a bucket with him, because he is a character in the book, which is the one thing that I have enjoyed writing about was his horse,
He's
Blackstone's
brilliant.
horse.
Has he got a name?
No, it's just the bastard
horse.
It
is just the bastard horse, because I kept thinking, have I missed his name
somewhere? No, bastard horse, because you couldn't name a beast like that. Spawned by the devil, there we are. So, gosh, the problem is you'd have to have a real beery session with Blackstone, Kilburn, the five captains, shall we say. Yeah. They'd be raucous and they'd be arguing and taking the mickey out of each other and all of that going on, as they do in the books. They're not going to change it, are they? Not at all. So it's hard to answer that question. Henry probably wouldn't want to go. I think it's his father and his mates, because what they've been through together, and I would then be sitting there as an outsider, totally outsider, because these are hard-nosed fighting men, and here I am, a wimp of an author, trying to suck up to them, and be their mate, and they're gonna look at me and go, oh, yeah, okay, get another round in, basically that's what it's gonna be. So it wouldn't be a dinner; it'll be a tavern brawl, probably.
Get them to start the brawl and then stand back and just write it.
Absolutely. Oh, but I might be the cause of it. Who knows? Yeah. I might get a few lumps and bruises from that. Yeah.
It'd be fascinating to talk to some of these characters, though, wouldn't it?
We create these characters on the page, don't we? And they sit in our unconscious and our consciousness, and we do talk to them anyway through the books. When they're talking, when they're arguing, when they're taking the mickey out of each other, or they're dying, or whatever it is, we are talking to them in a way. Our mind is there with them. If they would ever walk through your front door, you'd be hard pressed not to call the police immediately, because these were hard fighting men, bitter fighting men, and anybody, even in today's world. Look at what our soldiers have been through, men and women have been through the last few years, It changes you.
Yes.
And it affects you. And I think, don't forget, in those days, there was no such thing as PTSD or shell shock or whatever you want to call about it. You just lived or you died. So you were basically at a very basic level. You had a sort of animal existence, weren't you? You breathed, you had sex when you wanted to or could, You took money, you fought. Who's going to pay the most? Okay, off we go. This band of warriors that Blackstone has around him, these are the men who have the nuance that we want. They weep. which surprised me when I was researching these books early on, that knights would weep about the fallen, their friends. They would just cry with grief. You wouldn't see them crying on the battlefield, but afterwards, I remember in one of the early books,
Yeah.
Blackstone's young squire, he was a young boy, uh, was killed by the savage priest, and they found his body, and Blackstone wept. And I was surprised that I wrote it, if you see what I mean. Yeah, because I thought, hang on, here's this guy, and he's wept for this boy. And it made perfect sense. It made perfect sense that these strong, hard men, they knew how to grieve. They were traveling towards the city, I can't remember where it was now, and they found this young lad, and he'd been tortured by the savage priest. And it was because he was under Blackstone's wing.
Yeah.
He was under his protection, and it was just, I suppose it was a mixture of failure, grief, that here was this young kid who'd been sacrificed for it, and you can find any reason you like. But it was known, I think, in courtly love. And I remember early days when Blackstone was being tutored by his French friend who had been his enemy. He was taught about courtly love because he was this lumbering youth, as he was then, being taught how to dance and behave and all of that. And so it was in those earlier books that I actually explored courtly love. And how it was handled and what you were expected to, how you were expected to behave. So, this stays with the characters all the time. So, yes, he can weep.
I suppose it's also, there wasn't PTSD, but it's not that there wasn't PTSD. It was that it wasn't something that was recognised. But also, I suppose career soldiers like this, they just carried on fighting until they died rather than, coming home after the war. It's like the 100 Years' War is quite handy for soldiers because it just keeps going.
Yeah.
And they don't have to come home and try and live a normal life. And a lot of them go mercenary afterwards anyway, don't they? And go and find another war.
I mean, don't forget that once the big battles are over and done with, the kings aren't going to carry on paying them any money. That's it. They're done with. Off you go. So what do you do with all these guys? They're going to form bands and, routiers. They're going to go off and support themselves or find another lord who might pay them to look after a couple of towns. So yeah, there were the mercenaries, the routiers, the condottieri. These were all men who had fought in all the battles and come together. And in fact, were very well organized, a lot of them. They had somebody who looked after the cash and the banking, and the victuals. So there were large groups who were very well organized, like small armies, and they were up for employment.
And the small bands like Blackstones were more like a family, which, they've got more invested in each other because they spent so many years together.
Yeah.
They're like brothers because they've left their family far behind and don't actually... Do you think also it's because they don't have the communication with home that we'd have now? They don't know whether their family's alive or dead once they've left, or whether if they've moved, they wouldn't be able to find them.
Or if they even had families,
Yeah.
I mean, you can explore every one of those men's background and you'll find, where did they come from? Well, they came from it. Don't forget there's a lot of Frenchmen in there as well still, because when after Crécy, when Blackstone was so badly wounded and his brother died at Crécy and he was under Blackstone's care, going back to that first book.
Yeah.
Well, you've got to say to yourself, well, okay, they didn't have anybody. And you've got French in there, you've got Gascons in there, and all these groups of men come together. That's what I've written. There's a band of brothers, basically.
Yeah. So final question, David. What are you working on now?
Oh, Sharon. Well...
This is always, I've finished this one. I'm writing this. Oh, and this one's coming out next, isn't it? Because there's always 3 or 4 books at various stages of production.
Yeah, you're quite right. It is that. You're right. I have got a new standalone novel coming out in August. I'm going to London next week to do some interviews on that. I am about to start. In fact, I've already written 3 chapters of the next Master of War.
Oh, wonderful.
I haven't quite sorted that one out in my head yet, but that's going to be delivered next year. And I've just done quietly while I was waiting in between. I wrote a standalone spy novel set in 1946 in Berlin, just by way of a change.
Well, they do say a change is as good as a rest.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, but Master of War is next on the list.
So the one coming out in August, so that's the Knife Maker of Venice.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's set in Stuart times, isn't it? It's a couple of 100 years later.
Well, it's the year after Queen Elizabeth dies, 1604. Starts in Totnes, Devon, goes to Tunis, and then to Venice.
Mm.
Pirates, Barbary pirates,
Oh, wonderful.
who used to raid right on my doorstep here,
Yeah.
down the south coast, as you all know, you know. So that was fascinating. I got myself into a real mess with that one because my publisher said to me a couple of years ago, he said, "We know we'd love a standalone novel." I said, "But hang on, what?" And I'd seen this plaque 30 odd years ago that commemorated the theft of a whole village and a young boy by Barbary pirates.
Mm.
And I thought, there you are. There's a story. And I didn't know what I'd let myself in for. I have never done so much research in my life.
Oh, brilliant. I think that's the thing, though, isn't it? When you do a series, you don't realize the extent of the research because you're adding to it all the time. But for one standalone book, it's like all that research you've got to do for it is all in one go.
Yes, you're quite right, actually. Yes, I never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, yeah. Well, there we are. Hope you enjoy it.
I'm sure I will. Thank you very much for joining us, David. As always, it has been an absolute pleasure.
It's lovely being here again. Thank you both, Derek and Sharon. It's been good. We'll do it again, maybe.
We will, always.
Okay, that's lovely.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So huge thanks to David Gilman. I highly recommend A Rage of Swords, and I'm hoping that Knife Maker of Venice is going to be just as good. I'm looking forward to that one. Do join us next time when Derek and I will be looking into one of my favourite subjects, which is the noble house of Warren, the Earls of Surrey, who built Conisbrough Castle, where I used to give guided tours. So that's going to be quite interesting, and I think I'm going to get to talk an awful lot about that. I'm Sharon Bennett Connolly.
And I'm Derek Birks. Thanks for joining us today, and it'd be great if we get some feedback from you. Thanks for listening.